I still remember the smell of that Monday morning: citrus floor cleaner, burnt coffee, and the unmistakable scent of corporate betrayal. My name is Rachel Vance, 44 years old, Senior Strategy Specialist at Solar Grow Inc., one of Denver's fastest-growing renewable energy companies. Or at least I was, until exactly 7 minutes into that particular Monday meeting. "We're restructuring the strategy department," said Diane from HR, her voice as flat and emotionless as her ironed blouse. "Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately." I turned to Mitchell Carr, my boss of 7 years, the man who'd called me his right hand at last month's company gathering, expecting at least a flicker of regret. Instead, I caught something worse: the slight upward curl at the corner of his mouth, a smirk. 7 days. That's all that stood between this moment and the quarterly bonus payouts. 7 measly days after I'd helped close the Westridge Solar Array deal, a $40 million contract that would transform Solar Grow's bottom line. "You'll need to gather your personal belongings," Diane continued, sliding a cardboard box across the conference table. "I'll escort you to your desk and then to the exit." I said nothing. Pride is a strange thing. It can hold back tears even when your throat feels like it's closing. I simply nodded, stood up, and walked out of the glass-walled conference room where 24 colleagues pretended not to watch. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my car in the company parking lot, a sad box of desk plants and family photos on the passenger seat, my building access card already deactivated. 7 years reduced to the contents of a cardboard box. I drove home in a daze. The April sun seemed too bright, mockingly cheerful. By 7 that evening, I was sprawled on my couch, 3 glasses deep into a bottle of cheap Merlot that tasted like broken promises, scrolling through job listings I couldn't focus on. That's when I remembered the drawer. When I'd first joined Solar Grow, I'd been almost embarrassingly organized. I'd kept copies of everything, every contract, every performance review, every significant email. Over time, that habit had faded, but the initial paperwork remained, tucked away in my home office. I stumbled to the drawer, pulled it open, and retrieved a folder labeled Solar Grow Employment. The contract inside was crisp, official, signed by both myself and the then CEO, Arthur Dawson, who'd retired 3 years earlier. I flipped through it, not entirely sure what I was looking for. Something about severance, maybe a paragraph about notice periods. And then I saw it. Section 11C, a clause I'd completely forgotten about. In the event of termination without specific cause, employees shall be entitled to receive 10% of the quarterly profit recognized by the company in the quarter in which termination occurs. I read it 3 times, the wine fog lifting from my brain. This couldn't be right. This kind of clause was unheard of. But there it was, in black and white. With my signature and Arthur's at the bottom of the page, I remembered now. Arthur had been eager to hire me away from a competitor. We'd negotiated hard on salary. But he'd been unwilling to budge on the base figure. Instead, he'd offered this clause as a kind of insurance policy, a way to show his commitment to keeping me on board unless I truly failed to perform. "It'll never come into play," he'd said with a grandfatherly smile. "But it should give you peace of mind that we're serious about your future here." 7 years later, it wasn't providing peace of mind. It was providing something far more potent: the possibility of revenge. I reached for my phone and called the one person I knew could help me navigate this: Jonas Reed, a former college classmate who'd built a reputation as one of Denver's most feared employment attorneys. "They did what?" Jonas asked after I'd explained the situation. 7 days before bonuses. "Yes," I confirmed, now pacing my living room. "And here's the thing, I have this clause." There was a long silence after I read him Section 11C. "Rachel," he finally said, "do you have any idea what Solar Grow's quarterly profits are looking like?" "The Westridge deal alone would push us into record territory," I said. "Last quarter was around $32 million in profit. This quarter should be significantly higher." Another pause. "So we're potentially talking about millions of dollars." "Yes," I said, the full weight of it hitting me. "Millions." "They're going to fight this," Jonas warned. "Hard." They'll retroactively create performance issues, documentation, warnings, anything to establish cause for your termination. But I've never received a negative review, I protested. Not once in 7 years. Doesn't matter, Jonas said grimly. They'll manufacture what they need. Corporate America's favorite magic trick is making paper trails appear out of thin air. He was right. Of course. I needed leverage. I needed evidence. I need to gather everything, I told him. Performance reviews, emails, client feedback, anything that shows I was performing well. Good, Jonas approved. And we need someone on the inside. I knew exactly who to call. Erin Holt had been my colleague for 5 years. Unlike me, she worked in financial operations, but we'd become friends over countless lunch breaks and happy hours. If anyone would help me, it would be Erin. They did what? Her reaction mirrored Jonas's, though with considerably more profanity. Those absolute bottom-feeding scumbags. I need your help, Erin, I said, cutting to the chase. I need to know what's happening inside. You're not the only one, she said, her voice dropping. Mitchell's been on a rampage. 5 other people were let go this week, all high performers, all just before bonus payouts. My stomach twisted. This is systematic. Rachel. Erin hesitated. There's something else you should know. That Westridge deal you closed, Mitchell's already included it in the quarterly profit forecasts. They're projecting record numbers, nearly $38.6 million in profit. I did the mental math. 10% of that would be $3.86 million. The executive team is planning to use those numbers to justify massive bonuses for themselves, Erin continued. Mitchell's already talking about the yacht he's going to buy. A cold, clarifying rage settled over me. Erin, I need everything you can get me about the company's current financial projections. And I need you to keep your eyes open for anything strange around my termination. On it, she promised. Those bastards picked the wrong woman to screw over. The next morning, Jonas sent a formal letter to Solar Grow, citing my contract and demanding payment according to Section 11C. We included a copy of the original contract with the relevant clause highlighted. The response came 3 days later, delivered by courier to Jonas's office. According to Solar Grow's legal team, I had been terminated for cause specifically: ongoing performance deficiencies, insubordination, and failure to meet key objectives. Attached were copies of 3 written warnings and 2 negative performance reviews, all dated within the past 6 months. I stared at the documents, dumbfounded. These are complete fabrications, I told Jonas as we sat in his office. I've never seen any of these before. I never signed them. Jonas examined the documents carefully. Notice anything interesting about these warnings? I looked closer. None of them had my signature acknowledging receipt. They'll claim they sent them to you and you refused to sign, Jonas said. It's weak, but not fatal to their case. But I never received them. It's your word against theirs. Jonas sighed. We need more. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Erin. Got something. Mitchell asked it to recover old performance review templates. 4 documents. All created after your termination date. Metadata proves it. Sending now. I showed Jonas the text, and we both broke into identical grins. That's fabrication of evidence, he said. That's not just breach of contract territory anymore. That's fraud. But the universe wasn't done delivering gifts. Later that evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Ms. Vance, my name is Paul Marsh. I worked in financial operations at Solar Grow until last Tuesday. I was terminated after raising concerns about profit projections being manipulated. I have documentation that may help your case. Can we meet? Paul turned out to be a nervous, thin man in his 30s with perpetually smudged glasses. We met at a quiet coffee shop far from Solar Grow's offices. I was asked to adjust the quarterly forecasts, he explained, his voice barely above a whisper despite the cafe's ambient noise. The CFO wanted the numbers to look better than they were. By how much, I asked. About 12% overall. Nothing that would trigger SEC attention, but enough to justify bigger executive bonuses. He slid a flash drive across the table. I kept the original projections and the emails asking for the changes. I stared at the small black drive. Why are you helping me? Paul adjusted his glasses. They fired me for doing my job ethically. Then I heard they fired you right before bonuses. He shrugged. Some people deserve to burn. With Paul's flash drive and Aaron's metadata evidence, we now had two bombshells. Proof that Mitchell had fabricated reasons to fire me after the fact, and evidence of financial manipulation. Jonas was ecstatic. Time to go nuclear, he declared. I'm requesting a meeting with the CEO. The meeting was set for Friday morning, what would have been bonus day. Jonas and I arrived at Solar Grow's Gleaming Glass headquarters at exactly 9 a.m. Diane from HR met us in the lobby, her face now considerably less composed than during our last encounter. She led us to the executive conference room where Marlon Tate, Solar Grow's CEO, sat with Mitchell and two people I assumed were company attorneys. Mitchell's smirk had graduated to a full sneer. Ms. Vance, Marlon began with rehearsed cordiality. I understand you have concerns about your termination. While I regret that things ended on difficult terms, I'm sure we can find a reasonable, Mr. Tate, Jonas interrupted. Let me save everyone some time. My client was wrongfully terminated 7 days before she was due to receive her quarterly bonus. Despite her exemplary performance, her contract contains a clear clause entitling her to 10% of quarterly profits in the event of termination without cause. Mitchell leaned forward. She was terminated with cause, as our documentation clearly. About that documentation. Jonas cut in smoothly, opening his laptop. I'd like to show you something interesting about those performance warnings. He turned the screen toward Marlon, displaying the metadata from the files Aaron had provided. These files were created on April 12th, 3 days after Ms. Vance was terminated. That's fabrication of evidence, Mr. Tate. Mitchell's face reddened. That's not. And here. Jonas continued as if Mitchell hadn't spoken. We have emails from the CFO to the financial operations team, instructing them to inflate quarterly profit projections by approximately 12%. Marlon's expression had transformed from polite indifference to rigid attention. Where did you get these? That's not relevant, Jonas replied. What is relevant is that we have them. And should this matter proceed to court, they will become public record. I imagine the SEC would find them particularly interesting. The room fell silent. Mitchell's sneer had vanished, replaced by a sickly pallor. Marlon finally broke the silence, turning to Mitchell. You told me this termination was justified. Mitchell stammered. She was underperforming. The Westridge deal was practically closed already. She just happened to be the Westridge deal, I interjected. The one I cultivated for 14 months, the one that required me to fly to Phoenix 9 times to convince their board that Westridge deal. Marlon held up his hand, then turned to one of the attorneys and whispered something. The attorney nodded grimly. Mitchell, Marlon said, his voice ice cold. You're excused. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. Mitchell's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You can't. This is out now. After Mitchell slunk away, Marlon faced us again. What are you looking for here, exactly? Jonas smiled thinly. My client's contract is quite clear. 10% of the quarterly profit, which according to your own projections, which we have, I added, patting my bag where Paul's flash drive sat, will amount to approximately $3.86 million. Jonas finished. Marlon winced. That's an extraordinary demand. It's not a demand, Jonas corrected. It's a contractual obligation, one that Solar Grow agreed to. The negotiation lasted another hour, but the outcome was never really in doubt. By noon, we had a settlement agreement drafted $386 million to be paid to me within 7 business days, along with a mutual non-disparagement clause. But I wasn't done. 2 more things, I said as the attorneys finalized the paperwork. Marlon looked up wearily. Yes. Paul Marsh needs to be compensated for his wrongful termination as well. Who? The financial analyst who refused to manipulate your books. I want $250,000 for him, categorized as consulting fees if you prefer. Marlon hesitated, then nodded. Fine. And the second thing. Erin Holt deserves a promotion and a raise. If that's not possible, then she needs the most glowing recommendation letter you've ever written when she decides to leave. A flicker of realization crossed Marlon's face. Ms. Holt from Financial Operations. You have a lot of leaks in your ship, Mr. Tate, I said coolly. Perhaps you should focus more on how you treat your people and less on executive bonuses. By the end of the day, the settlement was signed. Within a week, $3.86 million minus Jonas's very reasonable 25% contingency fee appeared in my bank account. Paul received his consulting fee, and Erin got both a promotion and a raise. As for me, I paid off my mother's medical bills from her cancer treatment. I bought a small beach house in Oregon. And I took 6 months to decide what I wanted to do next. Erin eventually left Solar Grow for a VP position at a competing firm. Paul bought himself a high-end gaming laptop and transitioned into cybersecurity consulting. Mitchell, I heard through the grapevine, had trouble finding another executive position after the abrupt termination. 3 months after everything settled, I posted an anonymous review of Solar Grow on a popular employment website. I detailed the company's practice of terminating employees just before bonus payouts. The review went viral in Denver's business community, and Solar Grow's recruiting efforts suffered considerably. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I've found it's actually best served with impeccable documentation and a really good lawyer. Some bridges need to burn. And some contracts, they're just waiting for fire. I never intended to become a millionaire through a contractual loophole. I would have much preferred to earn my bonuses through hard work and loyalty the way I'd always operated. But Solar Grow taught me a valuable lesson in business. It's not about who you trust, it's about what you verify. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Jonas called with news that Solar Grow's stock had taken a significant hit after their earnings report showed weaker than expected profits. Apparently, without the Westridge deal's creative accounting, which had been corrected after our settlement, their numbers weren't quite as impressive. You cost them more than just the settlement, Jonas said with obvious satisfaction. Their credibility took a hit too. Good, I replied, watching waves crash against the Oregon coastline from my new deck. Some lessons should be expensive. The story might have ended there, but corporate America is nothing if not predictable. 2 weeks after that call, I received a LinkedIn message from Arthur Dawson, Solar Grow's former CEO, the man who'd included that miraculous clause in my contract 7 years earlier. Heard what happened, he wrote. Not surprised, Mitchell was always a snake. When you're ready to work again, call me. Starting a new venture in grid-scale storage. Could use someone who knows how to read the fine print. I smiled at that. Perhaps some bridges don't burn completely after all. The strangest part of becoming suddenly wealthy isn't the money itself. It's the realization that your time truly belongs to you again. No more Sunday night dread. No more rushing through lunch breaks. No more postponing doctor's appointments because of urgent meetings. I took my mother to Italy, a trip she'd always dreamed of but could never afford. We spent 3 weeks wandering through Tuscan villages, eating gelato for breakfast because why not? During a sunset dinner in Positano, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. What will you do now, Rachel? I took a sip of wine, proper wine this time, not the cheap stuff I drowned my sorrows in months earlier. I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I know what I won't do. I won't work for people who don't value loyalty. I won't help build something just to be kicked aside when it's convenient. Mom nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd worked 30 years as a school administrator, watching younger, less qualified people get promoted over her repeatedly. She knew corporate injustice intimately. Maybe you'll start your own company, she suggested. Be the boss you wished you had. The idea had crossed my mind. With my settlement money, I had capital that most entrepreneurs could only dream of, and I knew the renewable energy sector inside and out. But there was something else taking shape in my mind, something that had been growing since that viral employment review I'd posted. 3 days after returning from Italy, I registered a domain name, Fair Deal Staffing. Com. The concept was simple, a consulting firm that helped companies create ethical employment contracts and compensation structures, while also offering guidance to employees on negotiating fair terms. Aaron was my first hire. Paul, my second. Both brought invaluable perspectives on how companies manipulate compensation and termination. Jonas came on as our legal advisor, helping us navigate the complex waters of employment law. Within 6 months, we had clients, many of them former Solar Grow employees who'd experienced similar last-minute terminations, though none with quite the contractual firepower I'd had. It's not about making people rich through loopholes, I explained to a business reporter who featured our firm in Denver's Business Journal. It's about creating employment relationships where both sides honor their commitments. The article ran with the headline, "From Wrongful Termination to Wrongful Employment Reformer." Not exactly catchy, but accurate enough. A year to the day after my termination, I received another message, this one from Marlon Tate himself. "Ms. Vance," it read, "I've been following your new venture with interest. Solar Grow has undergone significant changes in our employment practices since your departure. We've instituted a transparent bonus structure and ethical termination protocols. I believe we could benefit from your firm's review of these new systems. Would you be open to a consultation?" I read the message twice, trying to decide if it was sincere or simply an attempt to repair their damaged reputation. In the end, I decided it didn't matter. If Solar Grow was genuinely trying to improve, that was good for their employees. If they were just trying to look better, our review would expose that quickly enough. "Mr. Tate," I replied, "I'd be happy to have my team review your new protocols. Our standard consultation fee is €50,000 plus travel expenses. Please note that we maintain our right to decline working with any client at any point in the process." His response came within minutes. "Fee accepted. When can you start?" 2 weeks later, I walked back into Solar Grow's headquarters, this time through the front door, with an appointment and a visitor badge. The receptionist, new since my time, smiled pleasantly as she directed me to the executive floor. As I rode the elevator up, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The woman who'd been escorted out with a cardboard box was returning as a respected consultant, commanding fees that would have seemed impossible before. The elevator doors opened, and there stood Marlon Tate, hand extended. "Ms. Vance," he said, "welcome back." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you. Mr. Tate, shall we get started? I believe we have some contracts to review." Behind him, on the wall of the executive corridor, hung a new, framed statement, Solar Grow's updated company values. At the top of the list, integrity in all relationships. I smiled. Some lessons really are worth $386 million. As I followed Marlon into the conference room, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "How does it feel to be back in the lion's den?" I typed a quick reply, "Like the lion tamer, not the meal." The meeting lasted 4 hours. Their new protocols were actually quite thoughtful, clearly designed with both legal compliance and ethical treatment in mind. I found myself genuinely impressed with the changes, though I didn't say so out loud. Professional detachment seemed appropriate under the circumstances. As I was packing up my materials, Marlon lingered after his team had left. "You know," he said casually, "that clause in your contract, the one that cost us nearly $4 million, I had our legal team check every other employment agreement afterward." "And?" I asked, though I could guess the answer. "Yours was the only one with that specific language. Arthur Dawson confirmed he only ever included it in your contract." I nodded, unsurprised. Arthur always had good instincts about people. Marlon studied me for a moment. He said something else interesting. He said he knew exactly what he was doing with that clause. That someday, someone would try to push you out unfairly, and he wanted to make sure there would be consequences. That I hadn't expected. Arthur said that, Marlon nodded. He called it corporate karma insurance. I couldn't help but laugh. All this time, I'd thought that clause was just a negotiation tactic, a way to make up for the salary Arthur couldn't offer. But perhaps it had been something more deliberate, more prophetic. As I left Solar Grow that day, I texted Arthur, "Just heard about my corporate karma insurance. Very sneaky, old man." His reply came an hour later. "Not sneaky, strategic. Some people deserve protection. Others deserve what's coming to them. I just helped the universe with the accounting." That night, as I sat on my deck watching another Oregon sunset, I reflected on how a single clause in a contract had altered the trajectory of my life. Not just financially, but philosophically. It had shown me that standing up for yourself isn't just possible, it's necessary. My phone rang. It was Jonas. "You'll never believe who just called me," he said without preamble. "Mitchell Carr." I nearly dropped the phone. What did he want? To sue Solar Grow for wrongful termination. Jonas's voice dripped with irony. Apparently, he feels he was made a scapegoat. He wanted to know if I'd represent him. "And what did you say?" "I told him I had a conflict of interest." Jonas chuckled. "And then I suggested he review his employment contract very, very carefully before proceeding." We both laughed at that. The perfect symmetry of it all. "Do you ever regret it?" Jonas asked after our laughter subsided. "Going nuclear on them, you could have probably settled for less and avoided all the drama." I considered the question seriously. Did I regret it? The stress, the confrontation, the bridges burned. No, I finally answered. Some things aren't about money. They're about principle, about making sure that actions have consequences. "Well," Jonas said, "your principles made you a millionaire and launched a successful consulting firm. Not bad for a year's work." After we hung up, I pulled out my laptop and opened the file containing my original Solar Grow contract. Section 11C stared back at me. Those 31 words that had changed everything. In the event of termination without specific cause, employee shall be entitled to receive 10% of the quarterly profit recognized by the company in the quarter in which termination occurs. Simple words. Powerful impact. I created a new folder on my desktop and named it Contract Templates. Inside, I began drafting model clauses for Fair Deal Staffing's clients' employees who deserved the same protection I'd unwittingly received. The modern workplace is often characterized as a battle between labor and management, with each side trying to extract maximum value while giving minimum concessions. But it doesn't have to be that way. Employment should be a partnership where both sides prosper together. Sometimes it takes a $3.86 million lesson to make that point. Sometimes it takes a woman with a cardboard box and a highlighted contract. Sometimes corporate karma arrives with compound interest.